Hey everybody, I want to do a video that gives an example of what Lab 1 is going to be close to. So this example is going to accept two inputs from the user, do a basic calculation, and do an output, display an output. So to do this, I'm going to start my IntelliJ, that's under JetBrains. Click that. Okay, I'm going to create new project. Now sometimes, well, this first screen, you're going to make sure that this says JDK 11. That's the version you should have installed on your computers. We'll click next. What I was going to say is later on in the course, we're going to be creating more complex projects. So we are not going to be creating project from template, but initially we are. And here is where I'm going to define what my project name is and where it's going to live. Now, file management is something that's really important in IT, and in this case, I've got this folder or directory. It's a synonym. We've got CSCI 2467 folder within my documents. You need to organize this. This is called a hierarchical structure, because we want everything of like kind to be together. So, for example, I want everything that has to do with Java 1 in this 2467 folder. Then I would want everything within class 1, whether it be examples, lab assignments, quizzes. I would want everything within that folder. So I'm going to hit a slash, and I'm going to go ahead and say, call this class 1. And then I'm going to say, within class 1, I want example. I'll call it example 1. Okay, the last thing on this path is my project name. And you can see my project name here is listed. Okay, I'm going to click finish. And it says, does not exist. Do you want it to be created? I say, yep, sure do. All right, so when I first start a project, there's a couple of things to note. First of all, I've got the name main.java. That's my file name. Now that's a default name because we use the template. Later on, we're going to be using different names, but right now that's the name. And we've got a public class name of main. That's the exact same name. Notice your file name and your class name have to agree. So this is main. Notice with main, I've got an open curly brace and I've got a closed curly brace. All right, so it's not this curly brace because this one belongs with the innermost other ID. So whether it's a class, whether it's a method, those go together. So this thing here is the main method that's within my public class. Now if I clicked here and hit enter, I could go ahead and type in another method within this class. Or I could do other things, as we're going to see. So we've got public static void main. That's a method. The main method is the driver of the program. So the driver of the program, being the main method, it's where the action happens or is orchestrated. So right now, we're going to go ahead and write code in here. Now you see these two slashes, that indicates a comment is coming. You should always comment your programs, especially by section, depending upon how much complexity you have. So when you read the program later or another programmer reads it later, you've got it all documented so you know what the area is supposed to do. In this case, since it's a small program, I'm just going to give a general description. This program accepts two whole numbers from a user calculates the sum and displays the output. Okay, good enough. Okay, since the program I'm using to record only gives me a 15-minute time, I'm going to once in a while stop it, write some code, and then explain it. Okay, so the next bit of code I've got above the main, you can see this private static scanner input equals new scanner system.in. Okay, so what this is doing for me is it's calling in the scanner class from the Java util library. Now Java has thousands of libraries of class definitions that allow me to create objects as long as I import that library. And so you can see scanner in red here because I have not yet imported it, and it's not going to work. Anytime something's in red in Java, not a good thing. You got to fix it. I'm going to click on scanner, and what scanner says, okay, is if I click Alt and Enter on my keyboard, it's going to import the class. So I'm going to do so. Alt, Enter, and you can see that I have now imported java.util.scanner. Now, if I'm doing a lot of classes from the same library, let's say the java.util library, I can use a wildcard character, the asterisk, and that will import everything I need. Notice that scanner doesn't have a problem with that, but I'm calling in a lot more than I need to, a lot more resources, so I probably shouldn't do that. I'm just going to go ahead and keep it as scanner. Okay, last you see my main.java has a red underscore. It's not happy. That's because I am missing at the end of this statement a semicolon. Okay, Java statements other than class declarations and method declarations need a statements need a semicolon. Okay. The next thing I need is to declare variables that I'm going to be using in this method. Now, this int is a variable data type. You should know this from the readings and from the videos in the Unit 1 in our classroom. If you haven't watched those yet or read the book, please do so. Anything that's in blue is a keyword. So I cannot call a variable int. Now, int1's okay, but there are certain restrictions on variable names, and that's one of them. They cannot be a keyword. So I'm creating int1 and sum here, and that's all I'm doing is creating them. I want to get input from the user, and then I'm going to assign the variables. So look at this. Whenever I want input from the user, I need to send the user a message. That is system.out.println or print, and here's the difference. And look at this shortcut, by the way, SOUT. I type in SOUT and tab, and it gives me the system.out.println that I need. Now the difference between println and print is this. Println will go to the next line after it displays its message. So if the user is going to type something, it's going to happen on the next line. I want it to happen on the same line. So I'm going to take away this ln and just have it as print line. I'm going to, in quotes, I'm going to say, please enter number 1. Now we don't have a number 1. Well, we do. We have int1. And the user doesn't need to know our inside jargon. All we're doing is interacting with them. They don't care that number 1 corresponds to int1. That's fine. So they're entering number 1. Now notice here, in quotations, I have a colon to kind of indicate that something is to follow it, and that's the user input. But I also have a space because I want it to look right too. So colon space, then in the quote. I am going to copy and paste this instead of typing it again because I'm going to need one for input 2. Okay, now, and then I need to change this 1 to a 2. Okay, so I added this line, input1 equals input.nextInt. From your readings, you should have gotten the very important idea of assignment. The equal sign is the assignment operator. Whatever is to the right of the assignment operator goes to the left. So, what this is, input is the name of my scanner object. Okay? So my scanner object is called input here. I could have called it Bob. I could have called it SC for scanner. I could have called it IN for input. It doesn't matter what I called it, but it should be something that's, makes sense. So this is my object. And I called the class in the scanner class. It's got the nextInt method. So it is able to accept an input for the integer. It also has next double. If this had been a double data type, it's got next line for a string input. So there are different methods depending upon the situation. So whatever the user enters, let's say it's 10, is going into int1. Now I've got int2, and int2. Okay, so int2 was going to be necessary in this program. Now, I probably should have declared it up here, but what I wanted to do was show you a different method because some people use this. Instead of assigning or creating variables on one line and then assigning them on a separate, you can also create and assign the variable on the fly. So I'm creating int2 here. I've got my data type. I've got int2 equals input.nextInt, just like it was for int1. And then I'm going to calculate my sum. Sum equals int1 plus int2. So we now have, after we've gotten the input from the user, int1 and int2 did whatever calculations were necessary, whether it's one calculation or 50, you've got the calculations after you've got the inputs. Then, in this case, we're going to display output. So we've got system.out.println the sum of int1 and int2 is plus sum. Let me explain this. The first thing, the sum of and a space and quotation is a literal string. We've got that literal string, and then we're going to interweave some variables into that. So the sum of, let's say we're going to use 10 for int1. The sum of 10 and, now notice the spaces here. The space before and, so we don't have it right up on the 10, and the space after and, so we don't have it right up on int2, and then the space before is and the space after is, so we don't have it together with int2 or with sum. You have to think about this and have it, so let's say I wanted to add a period. I would then add plus, quote, period, quote. Okay? So you have to think about this and practice this so you can get your concatenation. That's a very important term. You get your concatenation right. Let me do a file, save all. Okay? And now we've got our first program. We hit the run. And down here, it's going to ask me to enter number 1. Notice that space that I added is here. I say 10. Enter number 2. Same thing. 5. And then I've got that concatenation. The sum of 10, it's bringing whatever number the user entered, and 5 is 15, and notice my period there. All right, so that is an example to help you, hopefully, for Program 1. And if you have any questions, please shoot me an email.